Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and we're continuing the Acolyte, I guess. We continue to not really have things to talk about outside of that because we're having this lovely, blissful period where not a whole lot is happening.
Sure.
The Andor Empire story came out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the Empire issue magazine, whatever it's called.
Empire magazine, which always does its like Star Wars story, and then it's got like exclusive first looks at characters and things. So we did get our first look at the wonderful return of director Orson Krennic.
Oh, he looks so good. I'm so excited for him to return.
I'm so excited for Capes to return.
I'm actually low-key just hyped for this show in general. Like, I feel like people are underestimating how good this is going to be because I thought, back when they first talked about how, like, each, like, chunk was going to be, like, a time jump, I was like, ooh, that's not going to work. Like, I don't think I'm going to like that. And then now I'm like, wait a minute. That just means, like, they can bring whoever they want, whenever they want. Like, this is going to be fucking good. Like, I can tell you, like, I'm hyped for Andor, for sure. I can't wait till April.
I'm super hyped for it. I'm ready to go. And I know, too, that even the stuff they released is, like, Krennic is beefing with Dedra Miro, apparently, which I need to see.
Perfect.
How
did I not think that's what I needed to see? But
look, we're coming up on the end of the announced Star Wars shows, with the exception of Ahsoka Season 2, which is going to be in, like, 2026 sometime. But they look like they're ending on some pretty high notes here with Skeleton Crew and the second season of Andor.
Yeah, I guess the slates are getting interesting because we're getting to that point where we don't have any real knowledge of anything else outside of anything because everything's all in development limbo.
It's either in the future sometime,
right?
And like I was seeing a thing today about the Rey movie might actually not come out in 2026 now. It might have gotten pushed back. But then also I'm seeing things, it's like they got one of the people that worked on Rebels to write a new trilogy for them. And all of this stuff is super up in the air. The only things we can confidently say are coming are Skeleton Crew, Andor Season 2, Ahsoka Season 2, and the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, because we've seen footage from the Mandalorian and Grogu movie.
Right. And I think it's almost done, if not getting to that point. So it's one of those things where we're just kind of like, okay, there are not really any plans for the future for Star Wars right now. So
yes, which is we're almost certainly gonna see all of them in April of next year when they announce fucking everything.
Yeah, I guess that's what people don't realize. Like, just because it publicly hasn't been announced doesn't mean they don't have a fuck ton like ready to go in the wings. Mm-hmm. They're just waiting for basically the con to announce it because that's where they get the most views and the most press. So like, it's just marketing. That's all it really comes down to.
I get people that are like, oh, do you think Disney's going to announce a new Star Wars thing at this random press weekend in Pasadena? And I'm like, no, they won't. They do it on investor calls.
Sure.
And they do it at Star Wars Celebration. And these are the two places that Disney announces new things for Star Wars.
Exactly.
And I stopped caring about everything else that Disney does broadly, except for whatever Jay Schaefer is doing. I'll watch whatever Jay Schaefer is doing. That's WandaVision and Agatha all along.
Okay. I was like, I have no idea.
Yes. I'll watch whatever Jay Schaefer's doing. I don't really care about anything else Disney's doing at this point.
Agree.
All right. Do we want to dive into this episode? What are we talking about today, Bradley?
Today we're talking about the Acolyte episode 4 titled Day. Racing to the next target, the Jedi head to a new world as they close in on a clever assassin. Charles, what's one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
One thing I really liked about this episode was some of the interplay between May and Khmer. I briefly blanked on how to pronounce his name. Khmer. Why I forgot Khmer.
I don't know why we always forget how to say his name. I do this all the time. I edit it out usually. But
it's late. I've been at work all day. I literally came from work, got on this call, like brain non-functional. The conversations between May and Khmer I really enjoyed. And really just the conversations that characters have in general in this episode. This is a lot of characters talking to each other, and I enjoyed the content of those conversations. Because I'm thinking too about Osha and Yord and how this sheds insight. One thing I didn't like, and we're going to talk about it with one specific scene, because there's one specific scene that is the biggest offender of this. This episode is half an episode, and you can tell. The others have a narrative through line all the way through them. This one does not. This one stops at the halfway point. It is all set up. We talked about setups and payoffs. This episode is all set up. There is almost nothing gets paid off in this episode at all. And it is very evident when you were watching the episode. I actually kind of had to stop myself from going back, like continuing on and watching the next episode, because I was like, okay, now that all the setup's out of the way, I really want to get into the like really good part. But we'll get into that next week, and this is the episode I have in front of me to work with. So what about you, Bradley? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
I'm with you on the did not like. Structure wise, this episode was just not it. Like, you're right. It's half an episode. It sucks because the stuff that's in it is so good. And you're like, all the conversations are very important. All the people's connections with each other are so good. I mean, they all mean something and they're all meant to be there. The problem is we didn't finish the episode. There's no ending. It just kind of goes like cliffhanger and then that's it. You're expected to watch this with Night. Unfortunately, this episode does not stand on its own. So I did not like that. What I did like was I just wrote liked Manny. Just like Manny.
He's so good in this episode.
He's so good in this episode because what it is setting up, which we'll talk about it in the next episode, obviously.
We will talk about it next week. We will talk about what this episode is setting up with regards to him. Everything he does in this episode is so important and so good, and the characterization that he portrays in this episode is so good. I like the fact that he didn't win Sexiest Man Alive this year pisses me off. Oh, that was a fucking crime. That was an absolute crime.
And honestly, and he's in the issue too, which sucks because like they do this thing where like they'll put like a bunch of guys in the issue like to be like, oh, here's their own like page, and he's got like a page in the issue. I'm like, no, he deserves the goddamn cover.
Cover. Who won anyway? I'm just curious now.
Jonathan Krasinski won. I don't know why, but he won. Honestly, I would have given it to like I if you had said like, oh, Glenn Powell won or something, I've been like, okay, I get it. Like, because he did a lot this year. He was in a lot of movies this year that were very successful, you know, Twisters and his little rom-com and stuff. But Jonathan Krasinski, I was like, what did you do this year to warrant being Sexiest Man Alive this year? You weren't in anything. And...
Really? Jim from The Office? That's who y'all went with. Okay, sure. Let's talk about this episode.
Sure. Section 1. On the planet Kofar, Kelnaka, a Wookiee Jedi, walks through the forest to his shelter. At the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, Jeki trains with a class of Padawans. After the class finishes, Osha enters to thank Jeki for helping her find her sister. She is relieved to know May is alive, but considers May the Jedi's responsibility. They part, promising to meet again for drinks someday when Osha returns to Coruscant. Back on Kofar, May and Kymir arrive. May prepares to leave alone, but Kymir advises against it. He also insists Osha's survival doesn't affect their master's arrangement. They enter the forest on their quest.
All right, Bradley, for 3 episodes now, we've been promising to talk about who's playing Kelnaka, the Wookiee Jedi. It is now time to talk about who's playing Kelnaka, the Wookiee Jedi.
Oh, finally. Okay, so Kelnaka is being played by Junis Suotamo. Previously, he played Chewbacca in Solo, a Star Wars story, and the sequel trilogy, obviously. Fun fact, he also was Chewbacca in Smuggler's Run at the Disney parks. And his only non-Star Wars thing that I could find was 4 episodes of The Willow show, where he played the Scourge, is what it's called.
Yes.
So that was interesting.
He was like one of the big guys that they fight,
which
in the
makes
Willow
sense
show.
because he's clearly a gigantic man.
He's a huge man.
If he can play a Wookiee.
No, he was the double for Chewbacca on The Force Awakens for Peter Mayhew, and after Force Awakens, Peter Mayhew stepped back. And I don't know if it's Jonas or Eunice. I think it's Eunice.
Oh, is that how you say?
I should have looked this up.
Pronounced that better, but yeah.
I should have looked this up. But this is the guy who took over for Chewbacca for the rest of the sequel trilogy and in Solo. And that's really all he's got, although he
Yeah.
was in he is going to be in Wednesday, it looks like.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. Those sure are some weird symbols that Kelnaka is ominously drawing on his wall, huh?
So he's the most curious member of our, I guess I'll call our Jedi group, the Brendok crew. I don't understand
The Brindok
his,
fuck ups. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what to, we'll have to come up with a fun name for them, but he is the one that is the most interesting because he, to me, so far, we know nothing, obviously, because we haven't watched episode 7, hasn't done anything wrong, it seems like. So
Nope.
why is he in isolation? Also, why is he obsessed with the tattoo marks that both May and Anastasia have on their heads? Why is he so obsessed?
What an interesting question. Perhaps we will address it in a later episode. It's almost as if he has some very specific mental trauma
Yes.
with regards to this symbol, and that's all we're going to say about that, because I'm going to quickly move on to the next scene and talk about, hey, Bradley, it's Boken Sabers.
Oh, okay.
Remember Boken Sabers?
That's right. Sabine was using one previously on the last show, correct?
Previously seen as far back as the Star Wars Clone Wars episode A Test of Strength. These are the wooden training lightsabers that are used to drill and to practice. And yes, we saw Sabine using it in Ahsoka. We have also seen it in the Jedi Temple Challenge, as well as an episode of Star Wars Rebels.
That's right.
I just noticed it because I can't get Baylan Skull calling the post Jedi Order Jedi Boken Jedi out of my head.
Okay.
That's such a shitty little burn.
I just realized that that's what I guess it just means like, fuck you. You're not a real Jedi, basically.
Like inferior Jedi, like forged in the wild Jedi. Yeah. Anyway, they're being trained by a guy who I looked it up. That is not the glorious redheaded man from Game of Thrones. That is another separate glorious redheaded man. And then Osha and Jackie have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to read my note verbatim here.
Okay, what does your note say?
Yes, I see it too, Daphne.
This was the moment, like, I know you mentioned it last time, but this was the moment where I was like, oh yeah, I see it. The way she looks at her, the way they talk to each other, like, girl, you flirted.
Jackie, girl, you're not being subtle about this at all.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
Especially because, like, I'm like, are Jedi allowed to, like, have friends? Like, I don't know. It's just weird. Like, the way she says it, too. Like, or, like, I know that we're trying to pretend like they're not talking about going on a date or anything after, but are Jedi really
Which is totally
to,
what they're talking about. But
they literally are, though. Like,
which is 100% if you watch with your eyeballs what's going on. It's
she's basically saying, like, hey, if you're ever in town again, let's meet up. Like, okay.
Oh, yeah. So Jedi are only forbidden from like possessive attachment. Like Jedi can't get married.
So they can fuck.
Is the big thing.
Is what you're saying.
They can absolutely fuck. Bradley, I have wonderful news for you about the Jedi. George Lucas himself confirmed they can fuck.
I love that.
What they can't do is get attached. So literally, gay men would make the perfect Jedi.
Perfect Jedi.
Perfect Jedi. Because if there's one thing that we love to do, it's hook up with no strings attached.
I love that.
There is literally a scene, and I think it's Master and Apprentice, where there's a Jedi and he's like explaining to like his one night stand, oh no, I'm a Jedi, I can't get attached. Sorry. Like this is 100% a thing the Jedi can do.
I like it. I like it a lot.
So that's your tangent on can the Jedi fuck. The Jedi can absolutely fuck.
Okay. I'm going to write that down in my notebook. What I want to see in future Star Wars is a Jedi hooking up with somebody and then jumping out the window and being like, hey, I gotta go. Like,
well, Bradley, all of that's in the books, which are having much more fun with this.
I know, but can you imagine though, if there was some Star Wars-y thing where somebody was hooking up and they were a Jedi and then they were like, hey, I gots to go, like the next morning.
Guys, we're gonna get to the High Republic. We're gonna get to the High Republic. I promise it's coming. We'll get there. Bradley will understand. I do want to talk about a serious note with this scene, which is I find it interesting that as soon as Osha's name is cleared, she's running away again. She's not going after May
Yeah,
initially.
she's like, fuck that. She's like,
She's
the Jedi can deal with
leaving
her.
again. She has found an out and she is taking it because this is what Osha does. She runs away from things.
And honestly, probably the best plan. Let's just for a second say that that's how this whole thing is going to go. The rest of this story is Osha's going to fuck off and we're never going to see her again. That would have been her best bet, honestly, at this point.
Honestly, she really should have done that.
I
Like,
not that I have any idea what's going to happen in the rest of the show, but I feel like for her best self-interest, she should have just fucking dipped.
yep. And she's trying to dip here, and we'll see that the best thing for her probably would have been to let her dip, and Jackie's going to let her dip.
Yep.
Vernestra's going to let her dip. Unfortunately, there might be someone around who is pathologically incapable of letting Osha dip, even when it's a bad idea to keep her on this trail.
Oh, Lordy.
Oh, Lordy, we'll get to him in a
We'll
minute.
get to him.
However, I do want to bring up one more thing with regards to the scene with May and Chimere when they land.
Yes.
And that is that, I just want to read my note here again. Chimere is really clumsy.
He doesn't have a lot of coordination. He's not very capable, it seems.
Nope. Which is weird because like this man is dropping things left and right. He is tripping over things, and yet he somehow managed to enter this wood and locate Kelnaka.
Yeah,
And yet he survived this the first time by himself.
yeah, it's questionable at best. Like it's all the stuff that the information we're getting is
Interesting.
yeah, it's not
Interesting.
not obvious. I do have one random note editing wise. This kind of made me mad, and this is where like when I talked about how last week sometimes the wipes were unnecessary. This was one of those times. The ship lands and then it wipes to outside the ship and it's May like putting stuff in her bag. And I'm like, just film them getting off the ship. Why the fuck do we need to have a wipe and then just they're in front of the ship? Like we just saw the ship land. They haven't changed locations. They're in the same location. They're just off the ship now. Like, I don't know. That is, I know it's nitpicky, but that was like bothered the fuck out of me.
It's
I
super
don't love that.
nitpicky, but I also love that you're getting to use your college education to be mad about the wipes.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, the wipes are my favorite part of Star Wars. I think they're like a vintage way of transitioning between scenes, right? Because no movies do that anymore. That's not like a thing. And Star Wars has always done it. And so the fact that they're keeping the tradition alive is great. However, I think one of the notes that I'll give them is that whenever you use a wipe, it's to transition between locations, not passage of time in the same area. That like I don't need to unless it was day to night. I don't need it. Like you're going from inside a ship to outside a ship. I don't need the wipe. You can cut. We're there. We're already in the same location. It's fine.
I love how passionate you are about this. It's so funny to me. One final thing I did really quick check to see because I knew I had seen the actor, the glorious redheaded man who is training the kids in the scene. We're training the Padawans. It looks like. And his name is Paul Bullion. I knew I had seen him somewhere recently. He is a Sardaukar soldier in Dune Part 1. That's where I remember having seen him recently.
Section 2. Back on Coruscant, Jedi Masters analyze a hologram of May in combat. They discuss the possibility of May becoming a threat, especially since she killed 2 Jedi Masters. Vernestra suggests keeping the situation from the Jedi High Council to avoid scandal. After the meeting, Sol tells Vernestra he wants to bring her in personally, but Vernestra disagrees due to his emotional ties. Sol warns that another team killing May would prevent them from learning about her mysterious master, who might be part of a larger scheme.
Bradley, do you want to talk about who's playing Ki-Adi-Mundi before I get into all
your controversy?
That?
Yes. Real quick, young Ki-Adi-Mundi, I need to specify because young Ki-Adi-Mundi is being played by Derek Arnold, who is not the original person who played older Ki-Adi-Mundi in the prequel era. Yeah, that was Silas Carson, who was the one who played Ki-Adi-Mundi in the prequels. Derek Arnold, however, is a puppeteer and an actor who worked as a creature and droid performer in The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, so Solo, a Star Wars story. He also portrayed an alien and Borg Gullet in Rogue One. So I thought that was
Nice.
just like a fun like fact that he was one of the puppeteers for that. So yeah, so he does a bunch of aliens and stuff, but the fact
Also,
that he's
puppeteer in
playing
Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, a good show which was canceled, and that's bullshit. Unrelatedly to the Acolyte shows that were canceled, and that's bullshit. All right, so
but let's talk about Kiadi.
okay.
So first of all,
Okay.
let's talk about how old Kiadi Mundi is.
Go fuck yourself.
He's like 16
Absolutely.
here, right? Like, what is the
Go
age?
and fuck yourself into the sun, bro.
Oh my
Oh my
goodness.
god. Okay.
Tell me why this is such
So-
a fucking big deal and why people genuinely
I
care.
I can because I get a claim to I get to show off my Star Wars ability to check sources here, because I was one of the first people to just go and see where this was from. And if you check my now archive, it's privated. You have to be already have been following me to see it. But if you checked my X/Twitter account, you would see that I called this very quickly after this episode aired. So Kiadi-Mundi, this show takes place, we established, what, about 100 years prior to The Phantom Menace? Roughly.
Sure.
We decided. For the important thing is that it's 100 or over 100 years prior to The Phantom Menace. Got it? We got that established. So Kiadi-Mundi has no canonical birthday. In Legends, he did. And that birthday was about 60 years prior to The Phantom Menace. So when this episode came out, and people who are morons online, to be clear, this is one of those bad faith critiques things. People who are idiots looked at Kiadi-Mundi's presence and decided the fact that in Legends he was not born yet was going to be the next holy crusade that they were going to embark on, which led to one of the most fucking insane weeks I have ever been in the Star Wars fandom. There were people getting so heated about this that the pets of editors of Wikipedia got like death threats. Like, people were wishing ill on other people's pets. This led to the entire blow up at Wikipedia that I don't even have time to get into. There's a reason I'm not super happy with them or following them on socials anymore. Although I am still continuing to use them, they are a great resource, and I will shout them out when I use them as a resource. But this led to that whole blow up. It was just an entire mess online of people furious. And this is also when I coined my, I don't think that these fucking freaks online think of this as a media franchise. I think they think of it as their holy fucking religion, and Kathleen Kennedy is the anti-pope. This is the week I coined that theory, because the response to Kiadi-Mundi's goddamn motherfucking birthday led to this level of blow up. And Bradley, I have been saving the icing on this bullshit cake made of the sloppiest fucking horse manure that you could possibly get your hands on in the Star Wars fandom. I have been saving the bullshit cherry on top for last, because I've told you. But listeners may not be aware that the source, the holy vaunted text, the sacred books that were being overwritten callously by the woke mob that created the Acolyte, the gem of Star Wars history that was being taken out by the showrunners of this show, was a goddamn CD-ROM from 1999 called Star Wars Episode 1 Insider's Guide that was a bunch of trivia facts that predates Wikipedia. That's when I lay this all out and cap it off with this was over a CD-ROM. If you're thinking to yourself, that sounds like bullshit. That sounds like terminally online, please touch grass. I have not spoken to someone to whom I am sexually attracted in ages. You're right. It is stupid.
That is one of the funniest things that exists in this space. Like, I genuinely
That's
don't
the Star Wars
understand.
fandom.
Also, the birthday of an alien.
The birthday of an alien.
Alien.
He can be that old. Like,
That's
I'm
hilarious.
sitting here debating in my brain. This is how old this thing is and how obscure this thing is. I'm sitting here debating in my brain, am I going to have to explain what a CD-ROM is? Do I need to provide that element of the context?
What's funny is in this argument, for some people, you might actually have to.
Some of the fucking people pissed off about this goddamn CD-ROM from 1999. I cannot stress this enough. There is not even a goddamn 2 in front of the year that this fucking thing came out. We're not even born when the fucking thing came out. If you were born when this thing came out in June of 1999, if you were born in the exact day that this was released, you can legally rent a car. That's how stupid and old this whole argument is. The source for this whole argument is. Like, what? Some of you online, nobody listening to this episode probably, but some of you would not have survived levels of canon. Some of you would not have survived when we had to have levels of canon. I've told you about this, Bradley, when we had like G canon and L canon and C canon and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's too complicated.
We used to have a chart for how we had to determine the canonical nature of things. Y'all are out here arguing about a CD-ROM from 1999. Come on. I've been holding that back for months, by the way. I've been waiting to have this episode so I can rant about this fucking stupid birthday nonsense. Anyway, I do want to talk about another criticism that I do think is more valid, but I think the show addresses to an extent.
Sure.
And that is the fact that in episode 1, Ki-Adi-Mundi says that the Sith have been extinct for a millennia. Now, when this episode came out, obviously people were still mad about this because they didn't realize or forgot that there were 4 more episodes of the show and possibly this would be explained. But I also think that the show kind of provides an explanation in how Ki-Adi-Mundi talks about this theory that's being pitched to him. Because he's in this meeting and they're kind of discussing the idea that May had training. There may be an outside party that's training her. Ki-Adi-Mundi's reaction is to be very dismissive about this.
Right.
He thinks it's bull, and nobody manages to successfully convince him otherwise. He just doesn't have the rank to outrank Vernestra.
Right, because she kind of pops in and she's like, well, whatever I say.
Yes,
goes.
And everybody just goes along with what she says.
Right. And I would argue, too, that the show fixes this issue in the first episode. Because when Master Indara says on her comm, when she's talking about May, she says, unidentified Force user. They blanket term anything or anyone, clearly, that is using the Force in some capacity that is not a Jedi or something. They'll just blanket term it as unidentified Force user. They're not identifying them as a Sith. They're not identifying them as a witch necessarily. They're not saying it's a Jedi. They just have an over umbrella term of like Force user. So like to Ki-Adi-Mundi's defense, like they probably have not seen someone who claims to be a Sith Force user in a millennia. Doesn't necessarily mean that the Sith are not around or there's not people out there who are acolytes of the Sith. It just means that no one out here is claiming to be a Sith or pronouncing it to the world, right? Because as far as we know, anything we know about the Sith is they do everything in secret, everything in the shadows. So why the fuck would he know? That's the whole deal. Yeah, why the fuck
That's what was established by Darth Bane.
Right, and why would the Jedi even know, like, for a millennia that the Sith are even around if they've been keeping it a secret this whole time? It doesn't really, there's no defense there for, like, oh, the Sith, what he's saying is wrong, and da-da-da. No.
Presumably, Yoda seems to know how the rule of 2 works. I think that for the average audience, and for somebody who's not watched a lot of Star Wars or like really dug into either canon or, to a lesser extent, the like Bantam Books era of Legends, I think a lot of people view anything that's outside of the Jedi as Sith, with the exception of kind of Night Sisters have been around for a while, but especially, things with red lightsabers. People look at this out of universe and go, okay, the person has a red lightsaber and they're fighting the Jedi, so they must be Sith.
They have to be Sith, right?
When we've had multiple instances across Star Wars, all through Legends and canon, of people who are not Sith fighting the Jedi. People using the Force that are not Jedi. People using red lightsabers that are not Jedi. Looking at you, our Queen Asajj Ventress.
Exactly.
It's not as uncommon as you think, but for somebody who hasn't delved into that as much, I can kind of understand the confusion and also kind of understand, like, there were people who were, when The Force Awakens came out, incorrectly referring to Kylo Ren as a Sith. Now that's wrong, and that's nowhere present in the movie. In fact, there are lines that imply that the Sith are over and done with. I can't blame the average audience member for seeing red lightsaber fights the Jedi and assume Sith, if you've only watched the movies. That's also not the argument I think is being made by some people here. It's hard to parse out where the confusion is genuine versus where people are looking for reasons to be confused or try to discredit the show because they disagree with it on an ideological level. So I think the show did an adequate job for me of expressing why Ki-Adi-Mundi, who didn't believe the Sith were around, is dismissive of every theory to explain May's actions other than, well, May just killed a couple of Jedi, because that's who this dude is, clearly. My next notes are just, actually the entire rest of my notes for the scene are, Vernestra just continues to be correct about everything. Just everything she says turns out to be right.
The title of the show should just be, Why Didn't We Listen to Vernestra?
Why didn't we listen to Vernestra Rowe?
Because she literally says, Soul, do not go after May. You are emotionally tied to this whole entire thing. Please do not go after her. We'll send a fucking random ass team that has no
which
connection
was the
whatsoever.
correct thing to do. Her first thing that she did, which was to send someone else to go extract Kelnaka, was right. And then Soul has to do a whole pitch. And then even as he's pitching, Vernestra is pointing out things that are objectively correct to him. Again, this goes back to the brilliance of the writing on this show with regards to her character. We are so conditioned to see the Maverick Jedi as the person that we want to root for, and the stick in the mud Jedi as the person who needs to be overcome, that we don't take notice the first time that he is absolutely too attached to this, and she is absolutely right to be, like, hesitant of this. This is a Vernestra Rowe Stan account now.
Section 3. On Kofar, May and Chimere discuss May's master's command to kill a Jedi without a weapon. Chimere questions if disarming without killing is cheating, noting May's disobedience when assassinating Indara and Torben. May asserts her success, but Chimere argues she deviated from the instructions. When asked if he's seen their master, he confirms he hasn't. When May asks about what Osha is like, Chimere describes Osha as in over her head and overly attached to a very specific Jedi.
I really focused hard on the line, he collects people. Not like Darth Teeth. By the way, Darth Teeth is the master. We will find out why we're referring to him as Darth Teeth at the end of the episode. Darth Teeth he keeps people at arm's length. No one knows what he looks like, but he just likes having people as assets. He likes having them as deployable assets he can use. It's an interesting little note about this particular character. And also, I think it's interesting that Chimere is playing up the distance between himself and Darth Teeth, as well as May and Darth Teeth, for reasons we can't get into yet.
I mean, one day we'll talk about that.
One day.
We're getting there. I think the next episode we could finally
I believe the next episode we will be able to talk about.
Yes.
For no particular reason, not knowing what's coming up. I just have a sense that we will be able to talk about what's going on.
It'll all kind of make sense. Now, I do want to say I find it interesting how at this point the master uses random people to do tasks for him. That's something that, if this is a evil Sith person, supposedly, not really something they necessarily do all the time, unless you talk about literally the whole entire spiel of, what is it, Attack of the Clones, where everybody gets somebody else to kill Padme for them.
The incorrect spiel?
Yes.
The one that's wrong, the one that's incorrect, because it starts out with Palpatine, and Palpatine actually doesn't give a shit. That the movie literally says in the movie that Newt Gunray was the one who ordered the assassination. Anyway, I found that interesting in terms of like Darth Bane, the Darth Bane trilogy, because again, going back to the Darth Bane novels, which are not canon, but the creative team of the show drew really heavily from those novels. Building and maintaining a network of agents is something that's very important to the Sith in hiding.
Ah, okay.
This is something that's very important to them. That this is a key tenet of their survival, is they have agents to go on and do things for them. That the Sith are not personally doing everything. And in Legends, Maul was led to believe he would be the apprentice of Palpatine, but actually he was just being used as basically a pawn by Palpatine and Plagueis.
I mean, even in canon, if you think about it, he's kind of like just another Inquisitor, if you think about it.
He's the proto-Inquisitor.
Yeah,
I don't think even in canon, Palpatine ever thought very highly of him.
I don't think so. He's just kind of a servant, like
in Legends, like quite explicitly, he was told he was Palpatine's apprentice. And then Darth Plagueis came along and revealed, teehee, no, actually, you're not. You just thought you were because Palpatine was lying to you the whole time. And actually, Palpatine's creepy old man alien buddy was planning to be like co-emperors. Because that's totally a thing that Palpatine would have gone for.
I love that.
Plagueis is a dumbass. Like, sorry to people that like him in Legends. I find him compelling because he's an idiot who grossly misunderstood his own position on the board.
I do have one random thing when they were talking about the not killing a Jedi with a weapon. Chimera's telling her, like, you are not following the Master's instructions the way he wants you to do things. So I'm curious what the actual instructions are, because this is kind of like muddying the waters a little bit, because he says, like, okay, you can't kill the Jedi with a weapon, but then, like, also you weren't supposed to
but you can disarm them.
Someone. Yeah, you can disarm them. Like, what? There's so many like loopholes to this, and I don't understand.
May has to kill one Jedi without a weapon, but she can disarm and use their saber, which we remember back in episode 2. Remember when she went for Soul's saber?
Oh, okay.
That's why she went for Soul's saber, because she can steal them and kill them with their own weapon, but she cannot use a weapon.
See, that seems like cheating, like Chimera said.
I think where it is she can't bring weapons to the fight.
She has her like little knives, though.
But she never uses them against Soul, and he even points it out.
Okay. Well, because, yeah, that's right. She used them against Andara.
She used them against Andara. She tried to use them against Torben. It didn't work.
So then what was Torben? Like, so I don't understand Torben's thing.
Poison counts as a weapon.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But he took it on his own volition, so it doesn't really count.
Still a weapon.
I don't know. It seems like another loophole.
Clearly the guy in charge who has been watching this entire thing from the shadows. Don't know where he is, don't know what he's doing. But clearly he did not seem to think that Torben getting killed with poison fit the criteria. I think it is because, well, realistically, we'll get into it in a later note, but the final lesson that the Master is trying to teach the Acolyte seems to be you have to do a cold-blooded murder
to become an actual Acolyte. Yeah.
Which makes sense. Like,
yeah, they seem to be like practice kills up until the final.
May's just bumping off the rest of the Jedi because she fucking hates him.
Yeah, I don't think she actually genuinely has to kill all 4 of them. I think she wants to. I think there's really only one she has to kill. Well, I guess we'll get to that when we get to it. But I just feel like that's the only one that matters, I think. But anyway. Section 4. As Osha leaves the Jedi Temple, Sol approaches. She apologizes for not saying goodbye. He invites her to join his mission to find her sister. He recalls May softened when he mentioned Osha's survival, suggesting she might change. Osha initially refuses, calling May a murderer, and Sol convinces Osha to join as she is still her family. During the hyperspace journey, Yord briefs the Jedi team on Master Kelnaka, and Pip annoys an alien tracker named Basil, prompting Osha to apologize and ask about him, or them. Jecki reveals Basil is part of their team.
Soul man, you gotta let Osha go.
This was the moment. This is actually the turning point of the show. This exact scene right here. If Sol had just like let Osha leave, didn't care that she left, didn't say goodbye or anything, didn't even see her, honestly, then I don't think the ending of the show would have been the ending of the show. Without getting to it. I think this is the moment that everything goes wrong. This is the turning point of the show right here.
I would agree, because like you can make a case for Sol being like, well, no, I need to go like pick up Osha, who has escaped from the prison barge, because, you know, I believe that she is innocent.
Sure, yeah.
That you can kind of make an argument for. You can kind of make an argument for her sticking with them on, it's not Olega. What is the second planet? Sticking with them to go investigate Torben. I've forgotten the name of the planet off the top of my head. That
it is
argument,
Olega.
It
You're
is
right.
Olega. You can kind of make that argument. And then this is the moment where it's like, no, it makes absolutely no sense for him to involve her in this.
Doesn't make any sense. And she
tried
Jedi.
to shoot May. She clearly blames May and wants
She's a fucking
May
civilian, okay? Like, she does not need to be going on these missions.
Right. Like, there's nothing that's going to benefit from her coming here.
No.
Nothing has indicated she will be able to get through to May.
And in this conversation, she's like, May's a literal fucking murderer. Like, why should I even bother caring about her? Like,
consider, Sol may or may not know information about May's supposed murders that he is not telling us at this point.
That's true.
He may have a reason to believe that she is not a murderer.
And what she's doing is, hold up, wait for it, justified question mark?
It, like, maybe she kind of had a point. And so when he's turning the traditional Star Wars thing back on us of, oh, there's still good in her.
Yeah.
Bombastic side-eye.
That's
criminally offensive
gaslighting.
Side-eye.
To get you to go somewhere.
It's not gaslighting, but it is manipulation. He is manipulating what what Osha believes to keep her around longer than she should be around, which I do also believe there is an extent that Sol wants to reach out to May, that he might genuinely think, because he knows information that Osha doesn't, that Osha might be able to get through to May. He doesn't seem to have comprehended that Osha super wants May dead.
Yeah.
And also, like, what happens when May tells Osha it wasn't her?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Things to think about.
I want to point out in the background of the scene, I remember when this episode came out, I texted you the same day and I said, hey, since we're currently recording Bad Batch episodes, I was like, hey, Charles, what's that in the background in the Jedi temple there?
Why, it is the same alien that is the alien species of the baby from the Bad Batch.
Yes.
Little Force baby from the 3rd season.
Tarlafar is the species.
Tarlafar.
They look like little chinchillas. Or white hamster people.
White hamster. I love the white hamster people personally.
I do too. And the fact when I saw that, I was like, leave it to Leslie Headland to immediately put something in live action right after it was previously, like, just recently in a cartoon. Like,
well,
that's so cool.
It dates back further than that, but it was really hilarious that we were covering that episode around the same time as this one came out. As it was
happening. Yeah, it was so cool.
And the Tarlafar was in the background. Yep.
So this is my petition to see more Tarlafars in the background in Star Wars. Thank you very much.
You have this costume now. You can just use it.
Right.
You paid all that money for it. I certainly
That's true.
hope
It's
you
just
didn't
sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
Just sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
Just change the clothes and then reuse it.
Exactly. Speaking of aliens that resemble real-world creatures, we get our first introduction to the best character in the show, the ineffable, the unmatched, the MVP of every scene he is in, Basil.
What species of animal would you say he closely resembles?
He is like some sort of beaver gopher man.
Yeah, it's like rodent-like. I can't quite pin down what it is because he's supposed to be like a tracker. So I'm not sure though, like what he is. I was guessing more like a mole, but we've already seen like a star-nosed mole person in Kenobi, so it can't be a mole. So it's like more of a beaver, more of a chipmunk, really.
Yeah, like a little chipmunk man.
I think it's a chipmunk. There you go.
Basil. I have to say this really fast. Basil is a tenon. Tenon is the name of the species.
Okay.
Tenons are a really great example of how Star Wars canon works and has worked over the years. Because tenons were first created for the novel Han Solo's Revenge in 1979.
Okay.
So they have been around almost as long as Star Wars has.
Dang. And this is not the first time we're seeing them.
We're getting to that. They were canonized in the novel Catalyst, a Rogue One novel, which is one of my favorite Star Wars canon novels. And that was brought in by James Luceno, who did a lot of early work to canonize a lot of weird concepts from Legends.
So maybe we'll see one in Andor season 2?
Possibly. They then appeared here in The Acolyte. And now there's a new Mace Windu novel called Mace Windu: The Glass Abyss, which I have not gotten around to reading yet. I've not been doing a lot of reading the past week or two for reasons. I've been a little down, but it's on my short list to get to. So now we have this alien species that was created for a book in 1979, canonized in 2016, has now appeared in live action, and is appearing again in the latest canon novel.
I mean, we don't know how old Basil is, so maybe it's actually Basil himself that's going to be in the novel.
Oh, God. I don't think
kidding.
Basil is in the novel.
I don't think he's in the novel, but maybe
But he does
species.
need to show up again somewhere.
Oh, for sure. I think if anything good came out of the show, it's that we need more of Basil somewhere.
We need
else.
more Basil. Basil quickly became one of my favorite parts of the show, and spoilers, he will remain one of my favorite parts of the show, especially in episode 7. Basil also has a bit of a language barrier between him and almost everyone else in the party.
I love that.
We'll get to that.
Except for Yord, I guess.
We'll get to that.
I
But
do want to talk about real quick before we get too into it. Basil's being played by Hassan Taj, who is an actor and performer who notably operated R2-D2 in The Rise of Skywalker, or helped do that. His first ever acting role, though, was in Solo: A Star Wars Story, where he portrayed one of the power droids in the Kessel scene during the uprising or whatever.
oh, nice.
So that was one of his first acting roles. was a gonk droid, basically. So
nice.
Good for him.
You did make a joke earlier about the he or they.
Yes, I did.
Would it surprise you to learn that people were mad about this?
Okay, first of all, this joke is actually funny because it's, first of all, in good taste because she is genuinely...
Every queer person I know thought this joke was hilarious.
This is funny. People need to relax. This is hilarious.
This is a hilarious joke.
Also, he's an alien. So every time somebody
the
assumes an
joke.
alien's pronouns, that's the fucking
That's the
point.
joke. That's the joke in it, is Osha just assumes that the alien even has a gender.
Right.
And she's trying to backtrack and be like, wait, what? Well, we don't actually, I don't even know what this thing is.
Right.
Like, their species might not even have genders.
Yeah, we don't know.
That's the joke, and it's really funny. But people online were mad about this because they were like, the show's woke. They're putting pronouns in Star Wars.
Oh my God. It's a joke, people. Relax.
It's a joke. It's a very funny joke. And it is a joke about not assuming that an alien species even has genders. Like, come on, guys.
It's crazy. I was going to say a good segue to genders is there's another character in the background that I want to bring up that people thought was something
people
that
were
it
confused. This one I will give them. There was not controversy about this. People were just confused.
Correct.
And to be fair, I would also have been confused. The Keldor, who is in the background of the scene, is not Plo Koon. That is a female Keldor.
Correct.
She is wearing a mask, so you can't really tell. I don't know how you would be able to tell if she wasn't wearing the mask, but that is a female Keldor, and that is not Plo Koon.
Right. Also, I'm not spoiling
Plo Koon is around.
We'll talk about it next episode.
But this is not him.
And we find that out next episode.
Yes. So it will become really clear next episode that this is not Plo Koon.
Correct.
My final note for this sequence is, and I quote, "Everyone is so shitty to Yord, parentheses, he deserves it."
No one could ever make me hate Yord.
If Yord has one fan, it's Bradley. If Yord has no fans, Bradley's dead.
Exactly. I love Yord. He is so funny to me. The fact that he is just so up his own ass, like, it is hilarious, honestly. And I love that Osha is just like fucking with him, honestly. Like, because he calls her, he's like, do you have any questions, civilian? And she's like, no,
he calls
Yord,
her civilian.
You're doing great. You're doing great, Yord. You're doing good, sweetie.
I think he's great. I love how no one takes him seriously.
No. And he's literally leading this mission, essentially. He's like briefing everybody. He's like, hey, here's some fucking information you might want to know about a Wookiee. Like, this is important information. Like, you might need to know information.
Everyone gives him crap. Because, like you said, I love the fact he's so up his own ass. I mean, he could be up my ass if he wanted. He is a fictional character, but That may go down as the worst joke I've made on this show, but I'm sticking by it. I stand by everything I said.
Section 5. The Jedi starship lands on Kofar, and Jeki seeks information about Kelnaka. Yord gives Basil Kelnaka's clothing to track his scent, and as they hike, Osha confides in Yord that Sol believes May can be redeemed. Osha warns that if May refuses, Yord may need to stop her, confessing that she can't kill her sister and can't hesitate again. Yord understands, but suggests Sol brought Osha on the mission to confront her inner struggles.
The translator device is sick as shit. That's my first note. I love that they're using a translator. I love that they have to use one.
If you think about it, logically, I know that's hard to do in Star Wars. There's probably thousands and hundreds of millions of species in the galaxy. There's no way that the centralized database or whatever is necessarily going to be able to not everybody's going to know every language ever that ever exists.
Exactly. No, and I think that's really interesting that they use it because this is sort of a weird alien that she's talking to. It's not one of the aliens that we know. So like when Kelnaka speaks, a lot of people can reasonably assumed to understand Shriwook.
Right.
Like a lot of people can reasonably be assumed to understand Huttese. This is a weird alien.
Yeah, it's kind of like just a random planet in the middle of wherever, and they're like, oh, this random settler person doesn't necessarily speak a basic language that most people might know.
Jeki probably doesn't speak his language, even if she understands it.
Right.
She doesn't speak it. So I really love that they have this little device that they have that translates. And I also love universal translators. Yord, meanwhile, continues to be just the worst. I say this affectionately as someone who previously just stated a clear attraction to the character of Yord. He is kind of the worst in this scene. He waits till now to be like, give me your gun.
Yeah.
Girl,
wait,
what?
What? Also, why does she still have it is the other question. If it genuinely was the property of the Jedi, she just like was going to walk out of the temple with
she was
it.
just going to fucking leave the temple with it, which is so funny to me.
That's hilarious.
I love the montage shot, the sweeping shots. It's very The Lord of the Rings for me.
When they're walking all in a line. And
friendly reminder, Return of the King is my favorite movie of all time.
I also want to point out, this is one of those times when you watch the show and you can see that they actually filmed on location.
Yep. They went and filmed somewhere.
I see them. They got that aerial shot of them walking or whatever.
It reminds me. It reminds me a lot of Andor.
Yeah, for sure.
The Aldani stuff on Andor.
Exactly. Almost like a different time of year. But they went and filmed in this similar place. They're just more jungly, I guess.
Possibly.
Or more tropical.
I think the jungle stuff may be on a soundstage.
I think so too.
This is clearly on location.
The grass and I keep in my notes, I keep switching between forest and jungle or whatever, but like when they're just in like the hills area, I call it the forest, but like the hills area is clearly on location. The actual stuff in like what I guess is like the giant trees and stuff, that's clearly on like the volume.
That's clearly on a soundstage.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
I do love that Yord took Basil speak as an elective.
Because why wouldn't he?
Why wouldn't he?
Why wouldn't he take an obscure language from a random alien as a elective class?
Just to be able to say to people like, yes, I took Basil speak as an elective.
I love that.
Also, do note, Yord is the only person who can translate for Basil. This will be very important in the back half of the show.
I wonder if it'll ever come up again, but who knows?
I wonder if it'll be a problem that Yord is the only person on this mission who speaks Basil and Jeki has the universal translator.
Nope, I can't see that coming up ever again, so we'll
Just
see.
take a note of which two characters have the capacity to understand Basil.
Got it.
On a slightly more serious note, Osha basically begging Yord to kill her sister.
Absolutely.
Is incredibly dark.
What's even weirder, though, is that Yord is not as willing. I don't know. I feel like he should be more like, yeah, I'll do it.
That's the thing with Yord. He is a very serious Jedi, but he is still a Jedi.
Right.
And he isn't going to want to take a life if he doesn't absolutely have to protect innocent people.
That's true. I guess what he's trying to tell her is like, yeah, I probably won't do that, but you're really not here to kill your sister. You're here to clearly like make up with your sister.
Well, because he says like May has always been your wound. Like this, he thinks, and I think even Osha thinks at this point, that the wound of her family's death being tied to May is what has held her back at this point. And right now, everyone here, except for one person, thinks that that's May.
Yep.
God, I love covering these shows after they've already come out because I can make subtle references to the other things that happen.
Right.
Anyway, that scene was really dark. Surely the next scene will contain loads of episode-specific information that will be relevant to this episode specifically and help with the overarching narrative of the 35 minutes we are watching, because by the way, this episode's only 35 minutes.
Yeah, there's
We're
definitely
still
nothing
going to fucking talk about it for 2 hours.
There's definitely nothing in the next section that isn't going to come up later in this episode at all. Oh, wait, it's not. It comes up later in the next episode. They're just setting it up here because what is this episode again? Pure setup.
This is pure set. Okay, let's talk about the next scene because I'm about to get into this.
Section 6. In the forest, May and Chimere find their path blocked by a massive tree as they search for a way around. Meanwhile, Basil leads the Jedi through the forest into an area of growth-covered trees. Sol warns them to stay quiet, and Osha touches one of the lumps on a tree, awakening a large, moth-like predator. Sol activates his lightsaber and draws the moth's attention, and killing it to protect the group. The Jedi continue through the forest, and Osha regrets the creature's death, but Jeki says it's an honor for all beings to transition into the forest. Sensing Osha's grief, Jeki reassures her, saying that they are defined by survival, not loss.
All right, so when we talk about the fact that this episode is all set up and no payoff, this is the most egregious scene about
this scene right here, 100%.
Because this scene exists, the one where they encounter the bugs, purely for no other reason than to set up stuff that will not happen this episode. It is not subtly slipped in there. No. It is just a setup for a thing that's going to happen because they run into the bugs and then someone literally says out loud they are attracted to light, just in case you missed it.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it in my notes because I was like, it's something where they obviously say it and they're like, oh,
they obviously say it. They directly say it.
Yeah.
However, there is one other interesting thing with this scene that is kind of slipped in there, and it's a little more relevant in the next scene, like when Osha talks about it. But Osha is starting to unconsciously use the Force again. She could sense the bugs.
When she touched the bug on the tree, she felt its quote-unquote life force. So she was like, oh, I'm starting to get my powers back.
Yep, which is real interesting that she's spending time around the Jedi. And she's on this search for her parents' killer, and she's starting to get her Force powers back.
Definitely not going to come up ever again in
the
show.
Definitely not pay attention to that for the back half of the show. Anyway, I fucking love the conversation between Osha and Jeki in this scene, where Osha talks about, like, not being able to accept what she's lost. Like, Osha has never grieved properly. She went and her grief was joining the Jedi, who don't exactly have the best track record at handling emotions, even when they're trained from birth to do so. And Osha, an 8-year-old girl who previously lived in a coven, isolated from other children and people who are not her witch coven, is going to struggle to be able to grieve properly in any environment, let alone one telling her to let her grief go.
Yeah, I mean, they literally just go like, hey, your whole family... She wakes up from her nap and they're like, hey, your whole family fucking died. By the way, you're about to join this religious group where you're not allowed to have any emotion or connect to people ever again. So, yeah, we're going to get you gone.
Well, they can have emotion. The thing is, Jedi can have emotion. They are allowed to have emotion. You have to let the emotion wash over you and let it go. You can't be attached. To be a Jedi, you cannot be attached to anything, and that means even your own feeling. You can feel grief. It is okay to mourn, but you can't attach yourself to that mourning. You feel it, you acknowledge it, you let it go. And Osha could never do that. She couldn't let go of that loss. And when Jeki comes in with maybe one of the first pieces of wisdom that Osha has ever heard in her life, which is also one of my favorite quotes of the whole show, we are not defined by what we lose, we're defined by what we survive. If the events of this next episode had not played out the way that they did, I think Osha would not go in the direction she ends up going, because this is actually a good lesson for her to learn, to define herself, to take that same thing, the same trauma that she endured, And instead of using it, treating it as a whole in her sense of self, to let it prop her up, let it propel her forward. And it's just a tragedy that the next 4 episodes happened.
And it also goes into our thing about this is supposed to be part of the next episode, because imagine if this had all been together in this one
It would have been
episode.
the best episode of the show.
The whole entire show.
Look, I'm down on this episode. I'll fully admit it. It's not my favorite. And I'm down on it for being half an episode. And that's not the writer's fault, apparently. They clearly wrote it as 1 episode, and it got split into 2. But we work with what we're given. And I do like the content of this episode a lot. Individual scenes I like a lot. It's just we're missing a lot of the payoffs to the setups here. And that kind of makes this particular chunk of the episode weaker to me. And you're right, even the stuff that lands really strong, like the Osha and Jackie scene lands really strong, it would have hit stronger if we'd immediately gone into what happens in the next episode.
Section 7. Chimere leads May through the jungle. She confides in him, fearing the master's wrath if she fails. Chimere reassures her, but May doubts his sincerity. He runs off to get her water. Meanwhile, the Jedi lose track of Basil. Chimere later hears May screams and runs for help, but gets caught in a rope trap. May emerges, stating the plans have changed, declaring her loyalty to her sister over the Master. She plans to surrender to Kalnaka and the Jedi. Chimere warns of the Master's retaliation. Osha tells Sol she's ready to confront her sister. Sol tells her she will confront her past, and he will explain everything once they have May.
So this final lesson basically being, please commit a cold-blooded murder with intention. Little messed up, huh?
Only a little.
Only a little. Only a little. Yeah, it's not good. Whoever Darth Teeth is, they clearly have a pretty warped view of life and death and a warped view of emotions. Anyway, unrelatedly, Chimere's just being really supportive in this scene, which is nice to see. It's nice to see him being a supportive friend to May, especially because Darth Teeth is clearly a manipulative piece of shit who does not have anyone's best interests in mind but his own, and pushing his own belief system onto other people. But fortunately, we have Chimere, who is just a nice guy who's going to help May out. Just
a nice dude.
Just a nice dude who's going to help May out.
And she's like, yeah, he's definitely on my side.
He is definitely a guy that is on people's sides.
I do find it interesting how May starts to kind of the doubt is creeping in at this point. She's kind of like, what are we doing? Like, why are we here? This is fucking stupid. Like, she's not saying it outwardly quite yet until we get to the part with the rope, but like she is walking through this fucking jungle and she's like, oh my God, are we there yet? Like, she's at the point where she's like about to give up because she's like, what's even the point of finding Kalnaka at this point?
I'm going to phrase this very carefully. The reason I like the May and Chimere scenes so much is because May is essentially engaging in an exit interview with the philosophy of Darth Teeth, with this random dude who just keeps talking about what Darth Teeth would do. She would never speak to Darth Teeth this way.
Correct.
It is clear that everybody who is remotely around Darth Teeth is scared shitless of the guy, of crossing him. She even points out he's not here. So she's detaching herself from this philosophy as they go through her conversation with Chimere.
Yeah, it's almost like he inadvertently is turning her against the idea of following the directions of the Master, because like he brings up something and she's like, ooh, I don't know if I like that anymore. Like, she's like, oh, Darth Teeth's gonna get you if you don't follow the rules exactly. And she's like,
well, Darth Teeth's not here.
He's not here.
Actually.
And he's like, we're on this random planet in the middle of nowhere. He's not here. I'm going to do things the way I want to do them. Like, I don't understand. Like,
she still has that sense of individualism that she's an individualism that may have made her appealing as a Sith apprentice, but not one that's going to make her particularly good at it. Because the thing
she's
about
too independent.
She's a little too independent.
Right.
And I just think these conversations are very interesting.
I if only they would come to fruition in this episode.
Yes, if only something happens that we could talk about these conversations in more depth. But alas, we will have to wait till next episode. Possibly. I just have a sixth sense something's coming. Speaking of something going, Basil has just fucked off.
Yeah, that
A thing Basil apparently does.
why is Basil fucked off? But I guess he just does. That's what he does.
I guess this is it. Look, who am I to question Basil, right? He clearly knows what he's doing. We're just going to leave him. We're going to let him do his thing. Anyway, then we have a betrayal.
Yes.
Gasp. Who could have seen this one coming?
So,
Except fucking everyone.
but this is the it's hard to talk about this scene without talking about next week because this scene in particular doesn't make sense in the long run unless it is supposed to happen. It doesn't, does that make sense?
Listen, Chimere, the individual, is someone who, let's say, got himself into this position.
Correct.
And, maybe he did it by accident. Maybe he knew it was coming. Who knows? We don't. We just know that Chimere doesn't strike me as the type of character who would be in a position that he was not anticipating and did not think there was a possibility it would occur.
That's all we can say.
That's all we can say. Except I do have a note that May's sort of bragging to Chimere that she's gonna turn herself in. She explains her whole fucking plan.
Yeah.
She explains her whole plan to him.
Which
I want to
read
my note.
Didn't do that.
Well, here's what it is.
Okay.
Her overconfidence is her weakness.
There you go.
That's
I
what
thought
it
it
is.
was odd for her to tell Chimere, regardless of any information we might know outside of this episode. Why would you tell someone who has any relation to your master your whole fucking plan?
Because it's catharsis. Because she can't tell Darth Teeth, I fucking quit, go fuck yourself.
Right.
She has to tell it to Darth Teeth's little underling.
Right.
That she has strung up in a tree. My last note is, oh no, Soul said he would explain everything when they got back.
That never works out for any character ever.
Don't say that.
I think that's a trope, honestly. I don't even know what you would call it at this point.
Basically a trope at this point.
Yeah, I
Ever
don't
since
know if
Ned
there's a name
Stark
for it.
said it at the beginning of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I feel like characters do this all the time, where they always say "Oh, I'll explain it later. I'll tell you about it later."
I'll explain everything when I get back.
Right.
See how well that goes.
Or how about this? You tell me now, while we're in a very neutral
Let's
position.
have a conversation. Let's pull
Yes.
aside and have a conversation.
Right.
Well, I do think they get shortly interrupted.
They do.
So maybe he just didn't have a chance to pull her aside and tell her. Or maybe, here's the thought, tell her before you go after May.
Yeah, he should have told her when he was in the Jedi Temple.
Yes.
That's
Should
the
have
moment.
sat her down in a room and said...
Explained everything. Explained the whole entire
Explain
thing.
everything and say, we're going to go get your sister back.
And then she'd be like, okay,
But no,
let's do it.
He doesn't. He doesn't. And that's all we're going to say about that. I can't talk about that.
Right. Section 8. May spots Kelnaka's hut, but runs into Basil. He screams to alert the Jedi. May runs inside the hut to find Kelnaka lifeless with a saber wound across his chest, realizing the master is with them in the forest. The Jedi surround the area outside the hut, with Osha watching from behind. A dark, cloaked figure with a helmet appears behind them. The figure floats down behind Osha, and inside the hut, May watches anxiously as the helmeted figure examines Osha before igniting a red lightsaber. The Jedi charge, and the stranger uses the Force to fling Osha aside with a single motion. He then unleashes a powerful Force push, throwing the Jedi back, kicking up a cloud of dust.
Basil is the MVP of this episode and this show. He is the best, and I
right.
love him.
My translation of his scream is, she's here, she's here, she's here, she's here, she's here.
Oh my god. R.I.P. to Kelnaka.
Yeah,
You were
this was
criminally underused
oh my
in the first
God,
4 episodes of this show.
wasted, literally, but
I
wasted.
do believe they said somewhere that we were supposed to see Kelnaka die, and that got cut.
I was gonna say, would you like to know a little fun fact about this episode?
I would love to hear this fun fact. If you research this, I would love to get the actual primary source on this.
I
'cause
did.
just
I
half
don't
remembered
have
it.
the actual name of the person or the article that it came from, but one of the writers did say they had written a scene where Kelnaka faced off against the stranger, but for budgetary reasons, the scene was cut. I think that they should have kept it. I think that actually they said they didn't like the purpose of it. It didn't fit the narrative of the story for some reason. I disagree. I think that Kelnaka actively doing something just like Indara, just, I think it was needed because Torben's scene was so kind of like,
We had
whatever.
Dara's death scene told us things about her. Torben's death scene told us about him. I don't know. I'm on the fence because on the one hand, I would have liked to have seen it. He's criminally underused in these first 4 episodes. But on the other hand, like, I like that Darth Teeth robs us of this moment and robs May of this moment.
True.
And I also like that we don't see Darth Teeth in this scene. By the way, Darth Teeth is the one who killed Kelnaka.
Right.
We don't see him in this scene, which means his first appearance is later on in the episode.
Which I agree. I agree with his appearance later on in the episode if this had been one whole episode.
That is true.
Because think about it. He should not have appeared in this episode at all, if you think about it, unless it was to kill Kelnaka. It should have been, that's how they ended the scene with him killing Kelnaka. That would be the cap end of it. And it would have opened with May running in to his hut, seeing him dead already. And then it would have set off.
You could have done that.
That's kind of how I would have end capped it.
I don't know, because we're about to get into it with my next note. Look, I'm down on this episode. I think it suffers from being half an episode. The last 2 minutes of this episode may be the single greatest sequence that ends a Star Wars episode of anything, period, for the TV.
I agree.
Like, this is Darth Vader ignites the lightsaber in the hallway, levels of I am sitting there horrified and tense by this moment.
It's
like how this episode ends. Good. Everything I'm about to describe happens in like 2 minutes. Like literally starting with May saying he's here and the light dies behind her.
The sun goes down, right?
The sun goes. Yeah. Literally, she realizes that Darth Teeth is there the moment the light dies. And that's how the sequence starts.
So good.
Holy fuck, the end of this episode is so good. Like, if you had an overarching story that was self-contained in this episode and you ended with this moment, it would have been chef's kiss beautiful. Like, this motherfucker levitates down like a goddamn vampire.
You know what this reminded me of?
What?
This was the exact same scene in the Tartakovsky Clone Wars where Dooku
levitates down.
That I was like, we have not seen that since fucking Dooku in a cartoon, and I'm like, why don't Jedi
in visual
float
media
all the time?
In visual media, we have not. We have seen it in print media, but we'll get there when we get there. No, this motherfucker levitates down.
That is the most badass thing
wrapped
you could
up
do.
In his cloak of evil with his grinning fucking Joker slasher Cheshire grin fucking face mask, which is the mask and the like robes together is some of the creepiest fucking shit Star Wars has ever done. Like, that is so straight up like a slasher fucking mask.
I will give the costuming and the design department like all their awards, all the accolades, because they deserve it. This was the coolest design. It's so simple, but it's like so scary.
And then he's like, and they literally told Osha, like, stand back, stand out of the way.
Yeah, stay as far behind her.
She turns around. He is like 1.5 feet away from her.
Ugh.
And then the lightsaber just comes up in between them. And he just like flicks his hand to the side.
Doop.
Like, I am not even bothering with you. You are not even worth the effort of a full-on force push. You're a force flick.
Force flick.
And then he demonstrates that he knocked her out of the way and then promptly demonstrates that was holding back when he proceeds to like slam the shit out of the entire party. This was the moment I knew every single one of these motherfuckers is going to be dead by the end of this show. The minute he turned up, I was like,
oh yeah, things are about to go down.
Things are about to go down. Shit's about to go down. Darth Teeth has one of the best villain entrances in the history of, maybe even in the history of media, period. the way that this villain entrance is. Like, the only villain entrances I can think of in Star Wars that have been cooler than this have all belonged to either Darth Vader or Darth Maul.
It's definitely up there. And I can see why people like, look, say what people will say what they want to say about this show in general, but people arguably all agree that the Stranger is one of the best characters that Star Wars has come up with in a long time. And the fact that we have no merchandise for this fucking character right now.
We have a helmet. So
That's
there was a helmet
it.
that sold out.
That's
it.
We don't have a Black Series. We don't have a Funko Pop. We don't have fucking a goddamn plush. Like, we have nothing of the Stranger except for an overpriced helmet. And I'm not, first of all, I don't buy helmets, so that's not going to happen. But
you don't have the shelf space for that.
I don't have the shelf space for that. But the fact that we have no merchandise for this character, which is a literal crime.
I'm pretty sure this is a crime under like international law, under the Geneva Conventions or whatever, that I can't own every likeness of this man.
Oh, well.
Criminal. Utterly criminal. Anyway, and that's the end of the episode, which if you're gonna end this episode, this is the way to do it.
I was gonna say, at least, you know, for all the grief we give them for not being a full episode, at least they ended it banger.
They ended on a banger note.
Because
they sent this shit out incredibly.
If you end it on a banger, that means you have to start with a banger, right? On the next episode. So
oh yeah, and not to spoil too much of where the next episode is going, but to be clear, the only reason episode 5 is not my favorite episode is because I find episode 7 more philosophically interesting and character interesting than episode 5. Episode 5, I remember when episode 4 came out. And I remember being asked about this by people who weren't Star Wars fans and talking about this and being like, well, episode 4 was a little weak, I don't know. And I'm like, look, very clearly, episode 4 sets up the confrontation between the Stranger and the party of Jedi. And I predict that episode 5 is just going to be him beating the absolute shit out of all of them for 35 minutes. And we'll see if I was correct about that.
We'll find out next week.
We'll find out next week. But before we get into final thoughts, Bradley, you want to tell us a little bit about who wrote and directed this episode?
Yes. So this episode was directed by Alex Garcia Lopez, and it was written by Claire Keichel and Cor Adana.
So Alex Garcia Lopez is a TV director. If you look at his IMDb, it is pretty much just single episodes of shows. Directed 5 episodes of the Cowboy Bebop, the live action remake, 2 episodes of The Witcher. Does have a couple of Marvel shows, but no Disney stuff that I could find. So no Disney trifecta for this guy. Claire Keichel hadn't written a lot, mostly known for writing 9 episodes of Watchmen, the 2019 show Watchmen.
Oh, nice.
Cor Adana, who is a co-executive producer of this show and has written 2 of the episodes, both day and night. I think Claire Keichel only co-wrote this one. Cor Adana wrote both this one and the next episode. Also written for episodes of Mr. Robot. And going back to a conversation Bradley might have cut out of the show, is a co-executive producer of Dune Prophecy.
Nice.
Bradley, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
Final thoughts are the conversations that are had in the first half of this episode are very good, needed for plot, needed for character. Amazing pair-ups that they have. Bads are that it's half an episode, that it needed to be combined with the next episode to make one mega amazing episode. Had you done that, had you created just an hour-long day-night fucking episode.
Which is clearly what this was supposed to be called, by the way. It was clearly supposed to be called day/night, and it's not day/night. And that bothers me because it breaks the convention that the flashbacks and the finale are both to be their own thing, and the other 4 episodes are X/Y. That is bullshit. That this one breaks it because it makes it...
Makes no sense.
I am dissolving into a puddle of goo.
And the fact that it's just a Disney Plus thing, it's not even like an actual writing thing. Because I genuinely think like if you take the cut of where this episode ends and you just cut to the next scene, which is the literal fight in the jungle or whatever, it's like the mid fight like of the next episode. It could keep going. You could keep watching the episode and it's still a good I would still be engaged. Like, it's something about this episode. Like, it doesn't actually do a bad job pacing wise. Like, if you think about it, the first half is setup. But that's because it's the first half of the episode. The second half, which is all the action, is the next episode. Like, anyway, that's the only actual crime that I believe that this show commits, is splitting this 2 episodes, really. I genuinely believe that to my heart of hearts, that this was the true crime of this show, was that they split up this episode. What about you? What are your final thoughts?
I agree with you. This was I enjoyed each individual conversation. I see the setups for what they are now. I really wish that this one had come out at the same time as Night, or that they had been one episode. This is the most egregious sense of meddling that I've gotten, to where somebody came in and said, nope, you got to make this fill the 8 episodes. So we're going to split this one in half. And that really annoys me about this episode. That fortunately we can go on and watch the next episode now, but I think it hampers this episode a lot, that it's being asked to stand on its own in a way that the story fundamentally was not crafted to do. And that weakens the episode. And I'll be honest, I'm going to praise next week's episode a lot. Next week's episode is only strengthened by virtue of this episode having come before it. If you asked me to take episode 5 in isolation, I would have very similar problems with it, that it feels like half an episode. So that segues into what we're talking about next week, which is episode 5, which is called Night.
Wonder what's going to happen at night.
Wonder what's going to happen at night. Bradley does a bunch of reality TV shows, not at night, during the day. God knows what he gets up to at night, and frankly, I don't want to know on the air. But you can watch those TV shows anywhere that you get reality TV, mostly on Peacock or Bravo, or on applicable streaming services. Or you can watch some of them, including The Circle, on Netflix, where you can watch seasons 5 and 6. 5 and 6. I feel like I ask this every week. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast for Light and Dice. You can also find books I write on Amazon Kindle. They are gay thriller novels. You can find those on Amazon Kindle. All right, Bradley.
Before I run the socials, I was going to say...
Oh, are you running? Are we not
quick,
running socials? Fuck.
Can you give somebody maybe one of our new socials that may not be on our socials?
Yes. So, update to the socials. So
because I'm not going to update the actual audio that I'm going to play at the end. It's still going to be the standard audio, people.
Yes.
But
so important information about the socials until I can re-record new audio for the ending, which I want to do on my new mic anyway, because frankly, let's be real, this mic sounds better. We made some decisions this week with regards to a couple of different things, one being the political climate at the moment, another one being the fact that X/Twitter is just bad. Like, we've been getting great engagement with the Acolyte stuff, and if you came to us from those tweets for the Acolyte, thank you for joining us. We hope you're enjoying the show. However, prior to those tweets, really, we weren't getting engagement. We were getting a handful of listeners. Thank you guys for being supportive. But those tweets just weren't seeing reach, and they weren't kind of worth the effort to maintain the account. So we have actually posted a thing. We are no longer posting to X or Twitter. The account is remaining for the moment as sort of a thing to direct people. If you go to that account, or if you go to anywhere where we post, you can find a link to our link tree. Our link tree not only includes the locations where you can find this show, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, but it will also take you to all of our active social media accounts. We have transitioned over to Blue Sky, which is the new alternative for where we're going to be posting our episode drops, just because a lot of people I know have moved over to Blue Sky in the wake of, that little election that we had and people being sick of Twitter. So we're trying that out for now. You can also, of course, follow us on Instagram and, of course, on TikTok, where we post very incendiary clips from this show. Can't wait to figure out which one Bradley posts this week to piss people off. Not quite Threads yet, but the socials have changed a little bit.
I added it, but I haven't obviously used it yet, even though we already have followers on there somehow.
It helped because when it linked to Instagram, so Instagram people have followed us over to Threads.
I was like, how do we already have like 50 followers on Threads? Like,
we just kind of want to claim it. Look, there will come a day when the Blue Sky followers on the Gold Squadron account outweigh my personal account, and on that day I will be very sad. But keep an eye on our link tree. That's where we always post our active socials, and that's where you can find us. So we're going to have an updated stinger at the end here, hopefully by next week, if not the week after. But now, Bradley, you can run our outdated socials. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com to let us know. And you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Gold Squadron Gaze. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gaze YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze, and we'll see you next week.
On the planet Kofar Kelnaka, a Wookiee Jedi. Okay, let me start over.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna mute myself. Oh, Woody Jet.
I did not mean to say that. It's hard to read, okay?
Oh, Lord. Well, we only recently taught you how, so.
Exactly.